Good morning to everyone. First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I know you have a lot of options for your professional development and you've chosen to come to the Dakota Professional Development Conference, so thank you. And just like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of people. I'd like to welcome Dr. Deborah MacNamara, and let's give you a little. He's a counselor and educational service to parents and professionals, based on the relational development approach. Dr. Gordon Neufeld. She's on the faculty at the Neufeld Institute and presents on all the Neufeld material. She's the author of the best-selling book, Rest, Play, Grow, Making Sense of Preschoolers or Anyone Who Acts Like One, and her new children's picture book, The Story Plan. Deborah is a dynamic teacher and experienced counselor with over 20 years experience in educational and mental health settings. She is passionate in taking developmental science and making it applicable to everyday life in the home and classroom. The underlying purpose of all services is to put adults in the driver's seat by making sense of kids from the inside out. From every questions to complex problems, strategies for making headway with a child or teen is grounded in a rich developmental framework. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. And the back to school that actually did end up coming at the end of the summer. I thought for a while it would never come. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. So should I just jump right in, Joe? Okay, I'll get started. Here we go, just sharing my screen. So I was asked to speak about why relationship matters, and I'm delighted to be addressing this topic. It's always been important, but especially now since COVID is upon us. It has been a very long summer. I'm sure for some of you, maybe it's been very short. We're in a bit of a time warp. And I know for myself that this issue of returning to school was ever present in the back of my mind as I went through the summer, thinking about what this meant for my children, for the teachers that I work with, for parents that I work with, and just the uncertainty and the ever-changing landscape that we find ourselves in. But what hasn't changed is the need for relationships. In fact, COVID has actually highlighted this issue more, this sense that we need to be in this together. The question is what is together? Everybody talks about being together. Everybody talks about the importance of relationship, but what does this actually mean? I'm delighted that this topic is at the forefront now, or starting to become, maybe not at the forefront, that's a strong word, but is becoming increasingly prevalent in the educational circles, and talking about how the relationship between a teacher and a child, or any educator, anyone in that school, from a bus driver to the front desk person, that this is critical in creating a culture of connection in schools where our children can thrive. There's been a great shift in science towards this, thankfully, from neuroscience to developmental psychology. In the last 75 years, we've seen an explosion of research on attachment science. But what does this mean? How do we do this? These are the kind of questions that a lot of educators ask me. Yeah, we know it's important, but what does this mean in the context of the work that we do? And so that's what I really want to address today, is the context of relationship. How is it that we do this? And in order to do that, to talk about the three major benefits that we get from focusing on relationship, as well as three very practical attachment rituals or relational rituals that are part of any culture that you can, when you look back throughout history, are part of relationships, are part of culture. How can we bring these to the fore in our schools so that we can create a culture of connection? But before we do that, I just want to highlight how we are in essentially quite a paradigm shift, and that a developmental or a relational approach, the one that I'm going to come with you today with, is distinctly different from the prevailing behavioral approach that has been the backbone of school culture. It's one thing to talk about relationships on the side of your desk. Oh yeah, relationships is important. You know, it's up there with a good curriculum. It's up there with good teacher development. It's up there with good, safe, schools and protocol, anti-bullying measures. But I'm actually going to come at this from a very different perspective. And that is that it actually isn't just something we do. It's actually who we are. And so this is fundamentally, when you look at raising a child, when you look at helping a child fulfill their developmental potential, which approach you come from is going to shape what it is that you do. If you come from a developmental or a relational approach, then relationship is foundational to everything that you do. It's not just something we do on the side of our desk. It's not something that we remember to do when we get there in the day, in the beginning of the day. It is fundamentally who we are and how we see our role in terms of helping children thrive and reach their full potential. My challenge today, I think, is when I look across the literature and I look across people talking about attachment, it feels very much like a transactional thing, something that we do in order to get something that we want. The end goal of any developmentalist is not to sculpt into a child their own agenda, as very much part of the behavioral approach, where tools and techniques are used to sculpt behavior that is acceptable. A developmental approach seeks a different path, and that is to use the foundation of relationship, which preserves the emotional system, allows for room for play so that a child can flourish and can grow to whatever shape, size, and potential lies within that child. The challenge that, as I see it, is that our schools, as much as our society and our homes, have endured a behavioral approach where tools, techniques, reinforcements, these have become the language that we use to raise our children. Well, science is showing us that that doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't take care of the social and emotional development of a child. This is distinctly different. And it's something that we now need to turn our attention over to. The reality is that behavior cannot be, that maturity cannot be assured. You cannot teach a child to behave as an adult. This is something that must be grown from the inside out. As Gordon Neufeld says, an apple seed looks nothing like the apple tree that eventually grows from that seed. And so this is the ethos that I'm going to come with you here today. One of the things that the behavioral approach has eclipsed is the role of emotion in development, the role of relationship in development, the role of where is it that motivation comes from? Where is it that a child's capacity to pay attention? Where does good behavior? All of these things, the behavioral approaches assume that we can sculpt into a child through consequences, reinforcements, all the rest of it. Now, I'm not saying that a school doesn't have to have consequences. Of course it does. It has to be reflective of society, and it also has to have a sense that someone is in charge. But the idea that these measures would actually help a child grow and fulfill their potential are misguided and actually are not well-founded when it comes to science. So there is a paradigm shift that we are now entering into. Do you grow a child or do you sculpt onto a child? The second thing that we have to realize, and I don't think this gets said enough, is that it's very unnatural to talk about how to develop human relationships. This should be as natural as breathing. This should come right to us as a social species. The question is why is it that we now have to talk about relationships so much? Why? What is it that has gone missing that was so critical here to us as a species? I don't think we take. I think we take that for granted. And one of the things that has changed significantly in education is, and I would say this is definitely North American wide and is increasingly changing worldwide, is that teachers and educators can no longer count on the benefit of having children enter into their classrooms and their schools that are strongly attached to their adults and who are seeking out their adults to be the one to rely on, to seek, to have influence in their life. The actual power to teach and to transform and to change and to help a child grow and learn is actually through relationship. And our children are coming into schools no longer as strongly attached to adults, but seeking their attachment replacements, which is their friends. And so we now have competing attachments as teachers, where we're trying to garner and gather our children's attention. I couldn't even believe this in university, where you would think maturity would be there in an adult population, where I would have to feel like I was an entertainer to try to gather the attention of my students. And so we have lost something here. Our children are longer seeking us out, which again points to the fact that we need to focus on relationship. We've lost the power to influence our children as we once used to benefit from in an educational environment. We have more stress, we have more anxious children, we have more aggression. And even though we have some of the best curriculum and trained teachers around, the Canadian Literacy Association says our literacy rates are falling. So what do? We have to focus on relationship. We have to find our way back to this. We have to find a language for it. We have to realize that it's not just something that we do on the side of our desk, but this fundamentally has to change the nature of our and the culture of our schools. And so that's what I'm going to talk about, not on a superficial level in terms of what it is that we need to do and convey to a child, but actually to say, how is it that a relational focus has the power to transform our schools and to put us back into relationship with our children. The very fact we have to talk about it reveals that what is natural is now no longer normal. And this is the challenge that we find ourselves in. So that's the context. That's the context. It's a big one. However, I'm going to just break it down into three very important things that relationship does for our students and for us, and three attachment rituals that helps us get back to where it is that we need to be as a social species, and how we're going to lead our kids through the situation with COVID and into our schools. Why do relationships matter? The first thing is that relationships obviously create culture. Culture doesn't come out of thin air. A culture is basically a set of group relationships where children come to expect what will happen, how they will be treated, what the adults' intentions are. It's how they hold you in mind, even over summertime as they anticipate coming back to school. Does my teacher miss me? Is my teacher thinking about me? Will my teachers care about me? Will they be happy to see me? And so this kind of culture, it's like the culture of a workplace, workplaces that are toxic or workplaces that help you thrive. And the whole important thing here is relationships are actually the backbone here that create the context in which children learn best. We know this. When you are in relationship, you're able to focus, you're better able to attend to what is before you, and you're more motivated to show up. You feel a sense of belonging. Belonging is not simple. Belonging must be cultivated through culture. It would be foolhardy to think that all of our children belong. Just because adults are there to welcome them doesn't mean that child has taken us up on that relationship. We need to work at this. This needs to be at the forefront. Of course, what does this attachment do? It helps provides the conditions so our children can flourish as separate individuals, have their own ideas, their own motives, their own passions, their own preferences, their own questions, to become an adaptive being, which means they're much more resilient and resourceful, able to handle adversity, and to become a social being. A social being not by fusion, by becoming a clone of their peers or following along, being part of the group, Lord of the Flies situation, but a social being in the truest sense, where they can fully show up and participate in democracy, become a fully fledged citizen, where they contribute to their community. That is where we want to get. And attachment is the vehicle. Attachment is the vehicle, not consequences. Consequences let you know when you're outside the lines, but they don't actually bring you to this realization of human potential. And so this shift here, the shift is to focus on how it is that we make our children dependent upon us. Now, a child who's in kindergarten this year, starting out in kindergarten, or in the primary years, that dependency is going to look a lot different than, of course, a teenager. But we can't think that the teens and our grade 8s to grade 12s don't need relationship. They do. They need the steady hand of an adult who invites them to have their own ideas, who invites them to take the steering wheel in their own life and to chart a course towards their future. Adults are important along the stretch of childhood, whether they are a teen or whether they're young. How we show up and how we intervene may look differently, but this dependency is a requirement of good development. So often we are taught to increase our children's capacity for independence, not realizing that, yes, this is obviously this is a great goal, but that how we get there is not through pushing our children, but by facilitating our children's dependency on us, so that when they are at rest psychologically, emotionally, it is from this place of rest that our children will grow. This is true for their body at night as they rest, and their body comes to still, and it cleans through and integrates the physiological necessities that lead to growth. However, this is also true psychologically, and so we need to move into relationship with our kids so that this rest is possible. How do we do this? Well, we need to take a strong relationship by realizing that relationships, when you invite dependency, that as an adult you have instincts and emotions to take care of a child, and it's this caretaking, these instincts to protect, to orient them. This is how we do things, to guide and direct. These are the protocols for COVID. Stay this far apart, or to play games to help them make sense of things. If you've got the younger kids, to look out for them, to possess, to lead. How many educators, have spent the summer worried, thinking about, how am I going to take care of these kids? How am I going to lead? How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to show up and be the answer for my kids this year? How many educators had that in the back of their mind? That wasn't something you were taught. That's something that's inside of you because you are that caretaker. You are the one to lead, and you see yourself in this way. You are the one to give the orders, to transmit your values, to command and prescribe. This is what empowers us to be a teacher. This is what empowers us to be an educator. This is what empowers us to be a coach, to lead a band. Whatever it is your role is, this capacity to stand in this place of leadership with being both caring and firm is essential to the relational equation. Children are not able to go it alone. They need to follow, and we need to lead, and they won't follow unless we lead, and we have to build those relationships. And it's interesting, in this slide here, you see that you have a bird teaching a fish. The relationship between teacher and educator and student, of course, there is a power differential here. Without caring, this relationship isn't possible. The fish only trusts this bird here because it trusts that it won't hurt them, that it is there for their benefit. It is there to take care, and it is there to lead. Once we show up this way, what happens is our students turn to us to get their bearings. They come to us with their troubles. They come to us with their problems. They come to us with their questions. They are more likely to want to obey, to seek our assistance, to belong, to feel a sense of connection, to follow us, to wait, to look for guidance, and to comply and conform. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. Relationships without rules don't work. However, it's not the rules that make the relationship or make a child feel safe. It's the relationship, not the rules, that matter here. But does it mean that we don't have any rules? No. It just means that as we take this position, that we have to be thoughtful about how we engage our students if discipline is required, how we do this in the context of preserving our relationship with them. These are all the benefits that we get from relationship. It arranges us hierarchically. It allows them to know where they need to turn to, who is in charge. This is important. Schools that are based on democracy don't work. They don't work. Someone needs to be in charge, and charge in a caring way. And so they can act with natural authority, be able to lay down the structure, the routine, to provide a sense of safety. This attachment helps a child endure things that are uncomfortable, and helps us endure them. The more attached you are to a child, the better it is that you are able to be the answer, even when things are difficult between you or are challenging. It creates a sense of home. It provides a sense of comfort, a place of retreat. That's typically what a homeroom is, isn't it? You can have a homeroom and the designation on a door, but if you have truly a homeroom, it's made home, that place of comfort and retreat, because of the relationship with the teacher who's there or the individual who's there. When we have relationships with our students, it creates a compass point. We can command their attention, guide them, direct them, transmit our culture. How many times do we want to say to our class, pay attention, pay attention? I can remember being a teacher, like, this is important. All these things, trying to garner them. When I was teaching in post-secondary, they got to choose their seats in post-secondary. And I would always know that the students at the back of my class who wanted to be the farthest away from me were telling me that they are the least connected to me, or more shy perhaps. The students in my first couple of rows, they were usually often very engaged and chatty. I always had their eyes. The ones that I had to work harder to be the compass point for were usually my students in the back row. For whatever reason, not to judge them, I had to work a little bit more to be their answer. Of course, we want our students to follow us, to activate proximity, to be close to us, to command their loyalty, right? How many students in your classes will say to others, hey, be quiet, yeah, she's talking. That the day that that happened, in classrooms 20, 30 years ago, how different would that be in our classrooms today? So many of our students can just work to foil our lesson plans and talk behind backs, or have secret or side things going on, or looks or whatever. All these silent ways of communicating that lends us to believe we are somehow outside of our own classroom. That's the legacy of peer orientation. We are now in our third generation of where our students are, and our kids are more attached to each other at an increasing rate than ever before, which leads to more aggression, anxiety, because we are no longer their answers. It's very hard to teach a child who is not yours or doesn't feel at home with you. It also evokes the desire for a child to be good for you. You can act with natural authority and power. When I was teaching new students at post-secondary, as a prof, the biggest concern that my education students always had was classroom management. How am I going to manage these kids? And so many tools and techniques I could see were offered in some of the courses they took about classroom management. But at the heart of classroom management is relationship. Without relationship, you can evoke all of these tools that are obviously some of them very unnatural, very adversarial. However, with good relationship, there is a natural sense of power and authority. The challenge is how do we get to there? How do we build these relationships so that this becomes possible? So relationships create culture that we all live and work in and show up in and learn in. The second thing that relationships do is that they're actually the antidote to resistance and opposition. You may have noticed some of your students have a little bit of resistance and opposition. You think that this is a great lesson plan. You believe this is a wonderful thing to learn. You spent a lot of time putting it all together. Show up and they're, not interested. There's nothing that can get your blood boiling than a resistant and oppositional student. It also goes for the home. If you have your own children, you'll find this gets your blood boiling, as well as for spouses and in-laws as well. It is actually a human dynamic. It is actually a human instinct to resist and to oppose. It's called the counter will instinct. And there's actually good reason for it developmentally, although it is incredibly provocative. When you believe and see yourself as being the answer to children, to lead and to help them learn, and to, what's good for them. But do they follow? No. Oh my gosh, does this get our blood boiling? And want us just to double down on it. And this is the challenge, is that the counter will instinct is actually an emotional one, where basically a child or anyone who feels coerced or controlled can have a very knee-jerk reaction to saying, nope, you're not the boss of me. Nope, I won't do that. And you can see it even if you played, devil's advocate with someone. You can see this. The more someone feels pushed, the more there is this reaction. Now, what is this doing here? Well, first of all, in kids, it's preserving adults in their life to be the answer to values, to direction, to caretaking. And so if a child is not attached, it should not feel natural to that child to follow that adult. You can see this on the playground. You come up as when I used to do yard duty, I would come up and students I would tell them, okay, you can't go, up the slide, you got to go down the slide. And I would have some influence with them because I would know the children and I would help them at other times. But when I had to give them some direction, the more I knew the kids on yard duty, the more likely they were to follow. I would see other parents go up that didn't necessarily know them, or supervisors, lunchtime supervisors. If the kids didn't know them, there was this sort of, I can't hear you, this sort of lacking awareness. And so the adults would talk a little louder and the kids would continue to do the same thing. This is not about hearing loss. This is not about a child being disrespectful. This is actually an instinct to say, I will not follow those I am not attached to. The more immature you are, the more this is true. And yes, it is true. We still have some very mature adults who have a very strong knee-jerk reaction when anyone tells them what to do. Attachment. A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down. This is what counter will is behind this. The other reason that we get resistance and opposition is that children developmentally, there is a desire and a need and a bias inside of them to be the maker of their own world, to evolve as their own individuated, differentiated person, to become a separate being. And so sometimes what you'll see, particularly in preschoolers and young kids, and particularly in adolescents, is this desire to have their own mind about things and to argue and to debate, or just to, especially in our teens, to flex their muscles, as it were, their intellectual muscles, their rights here. And so you can see that this counter will instinct is not a mistake. It's part of good development. However, it can make it challenging when we need to go in a particular direction, and we need to take our kids with us. When we have kids who are very peer attached, kids who are failing to mature for lots of different reasons, who have stuck emotions, then we're going to have more counter will potentially. And what happens is that they never, the futility of following and attending and realizing that someone is in charge hasn't sunk in. I remember, even as a child in my classroom, seeing some students who would do the same thing over and over again, get into trouble, but they didn't stop. They couldn't, they had no emotional resonance for the fact that this was a futile endeavor. And this is what happens when kids get stuck. They get very stuck in resistance. Even so much, they can be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and all sorts of other esoteric labels that really are just about a child not being attached to those that are in charge. The more a child is stuck, the less they have their own mind, the more that they will feel pushed around by others. You can have a 10-year-old who's never been invited to have their own mind, never been invited to have their own preferences and emotions. Some kids just flatline and disappear from view, and some kids get very noisy and are full of counter will. That's actually a better path for many of those kids. The ones that are flatlining and you don't even see this counter will response, I worry about a little bit more. But the more that a child is not able to express, able to come out and be their own person, the more that they have a sculptor in their life, it is more of a problem for that child, and the more counter will you're going to have. And of course, the more stuck a child is, the more the counter will impulses are untempered. What does that mean? It basically means we all have counter will. Someone asks us to do something. Some of us can feel that knee-jerk reaction and say, ugh, I'll do it when I'm ready, or I already knew that, or whatever it might be. But it is our maturity and that tempering. And the other side of this says, okay, they're just doing their job. Don't be so hard on this person. It wasn't easy for them to ask, or it's just part of society. I have to do this. I got to pay my parking ticket. I made a mistake. Whatever it is, maturity is what tempers this resistance and this opposition. So we've got some time here. Our kids need some room to mature. The drama of the stuck child usually unfolds in 3 different stages here, and you may have witnessed this or been trapped in this cycle with a student. And it's important to try to eject ourselves out of it and to make sense of why we're in this, and not to lose sight of relationship as the pathway forward. In Act 1, our students get stuck. And so what happens? They get stuck in their own agenda. They get stuck in resistance. I can't do it. This isn't for me. Math sucks. Whatever it is. And so adults start pushing. We start telling them, no, it's not. We start arguing. We start going in the opposite direction. And as soon as we start pushing, kids put on the brakes even more. It activates resistance and opposition. The more pushed you feel, the more you put on your brakes. And so what happens when our kids put on their brakes? When we feel resisted, we get more persistent. And you can see this dynamic over and over again. This kid isn't getting it. How do I get it through their thick head? Why don't they listen? Do they need to go for a hearing test? Do you know how many kids go for a hearing test for this? It's phenomenal. Eventually, no, this is behavioral. Oh, it's behavioral, is it? Yes, of course we have a behavior problem, but that doesn't help us understand what are the roots of it. The roots are about counter will, resistance, and opposition. These are emotions. And when we have emotions are in the land of relationship. That's where we need to look, not for more tools to get a child to behave. We need to look to the relationship. Why doesn't this child want to follow this teacher? Why does this child, why are they not motivated to follow the rules of the school? Does this child feel a sense of belonging? Does this child have a relationship with a teacher? Does this child follow a teacher and not other teachers? Where is this child having the biggest challenge? For so many things, we have report cards and IEPs and all sorts of things that we do to examine our children. But did we ever take a relational picture for a child? Who is this child attached to in this school? Who does this child follow? Where does this child feel the most coerced? Where is this child always getting into trouble? If we actually focused on relationship, if we actually saw relationship as the context in which we do our job, our first question would be not how do we get this child to grow up, but what is it that we as the adults in their life need to do to help this child to grow? Why isn't this child growing in the right direction? What do we need to do to change that trajectory? So we get into lots of trouble with counterwill. But when we have attachment with our kids, when we can get to their side, when we can build these strong connections, our students will be inclined to follow, to attend to us, to feel at home with us, to take the form of us, to talk like this, be good for us, agree with us, take our direction, to be open to our influence and to measure up. These are not taught. These are the empowering effects of attachment. It's attachment that we need to work at. And finally, relationships are the answer when it comes to resiliency, when it comes to anxiety, alarm, and aggression problems. So many of our educators are concerned about the increasing levels of anxiety, let alone before there was COVID. This is predating COVID, and even more exacerbated now that there is COVID. How do we cultivate the resiliency that we need to see in our kids? And not the kind of resiliency where it doesn't matter, I don't care, it doesn't bother me, but the kind of resiliency that has some vulnerability to it. Yes, I'm worried about this. Yes, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to try. And there is, there is that sense the child's going to try to show up in their own life to tackle some adversity and not to run from it. And our teenagers need help doing this more than ever. In teenage years, they're on the threshold of becoming their own separate person. The inclination to run and to hide from what is on their doorstep, the alarm that comes from being your own separate person and deciding your future and showing up. There is incredible amounts of alarm that comes with it, but it's not unhealthy alarm. These are the growing pains that come with maturity. And so how do we help our children face into their destiny, face into the things that are adverse? And how do we help them sometimes see that things in their life are really false alarms? It's all through relationship. Relationship isn't just a technique, it's the foundation, it's the context, again, through which we lead our children through alarm, anxiety, and towards resiliency. The key that we know to resiliency is this, and this is well documented in lots of different disciplines, is that the key to resilience is a strong adult relationship with a child. Attachment is the shield, an emotional shield around a heart that can be wounded, an emotional system that can face too much stress, become too overwhelmed, faces too much separation, too much shame. There's that sense of there's something wrong with me, a sense of unsafety. I'm not safe at school. COVID is everywhere. Too insecure, too alarmed. Whatever it is in the context in which we live that feels too much, too overwhelming, attachment is the answer. Attachment is the answer. For adults, it's our adult attachments. But for our children, it is us. It is us who leads through it. And it's not that we take away the adversity from them. It's that we walk beside them emotionally, which provides through that connection that they have with an adult, because they are cared for, because they can lean on, because they can trust, because they know there is an adult who shows up for them. They can walk through that adversity with you, and you can lead them. Without that, it's very hard. It's very hard. It's very hard for us. Sometimes we are all leveled by things in our life where adversity strikes and we're gasping for air. It is the hands that are outstretched to us in those moments of adversity that pull us up. It gives us the space to have some oxygen so we can live to face another day. Just take one day at a time. You can feel you're just marching slowly beside someone. Just take one day at a time. So the answer to adversity is not to feel, is not to get rid of your emotions. but actually to be able to sit in the middle of them and to feel whatever it is that's there, one piece at a time, through a caring connection with an adult who makes that possible. And so this is the answer. If your classroom is safe this way, then the world may feel unsafe with COVID. But if you are in charge in your classroom, if you have the relationship of your kids are going to feel safe with you. And that's the key thing, is that we can't protect from COVID, but we can lead through it, and we can help children feel secure in our care through relationship. The challenge is, of course, is that our children have given their hearts and have turned over their requirement for relationship to their peers. When peers matter more than adults, it's not that friends aren't important. Of course they are, whether it's a young child or a teen. When they are attached to their friends as the answer to attachment, this is the problem. When adults are pushed to the wayside as nuisance variables, this is the problem emotionally for our students. Our attachment cannot shield their emotional system. Our kids are not well tended to when they're left emotionally in the hands of each other. Vulnerability is oftentimes not made possible. It's too risky. When you have immaturity, you have the chance of rejection, revealing, all sorts of things that vulnerable emotions need the safety and the cover of. But the challenge today is that we've got many generations now of peer-oriented. Many of us were peer-oriented. I can certainly, this resonates for me as well, growing up, turning to our peers for the things that we needed to find in our adults. And when this happens, what happens is there's a sense of separation, shame, and alarm. It is not protected against, but it is accentuated, it is elevated. And as a result, the emotional system comes under duress and starts to harden. We see a reduction of vulnerable emotion. We don't see the caring we need, the caring that motivates you to learn, to pay attention, to follow the rules, the motivation to take the steering wheel in your own life. Just even the attention system can be hijacked. So you can see, you just don't have a child, their eyes aren't bright. They're not able to attend and focus. They're alarmed, or they're just gone missing. When our children give their hearts to their peers and they have become the answer, we lose the power to influence, we lose the power to lead, we lose the power to teach. And so relationships are important in preserving our children's emotional systems and preserving our rightful place in their life. The challenges, of course, is that many of our kids come in very peer-oriented. Some of them are not, many of them are not, but there are increasing numbers who are. And so we need to take the lead here, and we need to be the answer, because this is how resiliency, this is how becoming an adaptive being is charted one step at a time. So culture is how we need to root our children. It's actually the foundation through which we can do our work. So they can rest and they can learn. If emotionally you can come to some rest, if you can trust in those who are taking care of you, these are the conditions that children learn best. This is not an option anymore. This is actually going to make or break us in terms of the educational system, whether or not we can shift to a paradigm that focuses on healthy development for kids that is rooted in relationship. I'm convinced of this. That we're losing our capacity to lead our children, and that we must return to a relational model that understands that what we do, just like this analogy of the tree and the roots, what we do to create the roots through which our children can hang on to us, can hang on to their classrooms, hang on to the adults, not just the building or the technology or curriculum, but hang on to living, breathing people who are there for them and show up for them. This is how we are going to help our children chart a course towards a future that is ever changing and unknown. And we have this within our midst. This is not something we have to go back to school and learn. We are social creatures. It is that we've lost sight of this. It is that culture takes us now in a very different direction from relationship, and that we need to find some words to describe that which is invisible in our life, that sense that we feel that it's important. And we now have to use science, unfortunately, to guide us back to something that is the most natural thing about being a human being, and that is to live in relationship with each other. So what are some of the tangible things that we can do to create a culture of connection? Well, the first one is collecting. The second is bridging and matchmaking. These are just words that we've given. And Gordon Neufeld is assigned to culture cultural rituals that have existed through history and time. You can see this. This should be natural. We just have to paint some words onto this so that we can highlight its importance and pay attention to it and focus on it. They may sound very simple, but please do not think that in their simplicity that they are weak. They are not. They're incredibly powerful. And as a teacher, I've known firsthand in working with my students this way, working in a department this way, the power of relationship to transform classrooms, to transform potential. Every teacher, I'm sure, has heard of the study, where you have the classes, the students divided, equal ability in each group, given to teachers of equal capacity. And one teacher was told, these are the most exquisite and gifted kids. You've got a real special classroom here. And then the other teacher is told, you've got a regular classroom. And what class does better? What class does better in the long run in terms of potential and success? It's the one where the teacher believes in their students that they're special and exceptional or gifted or whatever it is, the label you want to put on it, that they've got a really special bunch of students. Why? Because specialness is about connection. So being special is being significant. It's feeling a sense of belonging. It's a sense of being gathered. It's a sense of mattering. And so that's what the key is here, is that it's about relationship. So how do we do this? Well, the first one is collecting. And collecting should be familiar to all of us. But it's basically where we try to get in our kids' face in a friendly way, some way that we open up the ears, we can gather the eyes, some way that we invite our kids into relationship. Hey, it could be using their name. How are you? Good to see you. Welcome to my class. Let me help you with that. Just trying to get to hello. We naturally assume, that our kids want to follow us because we're in that role in the classroom, but that's not so. Our kids need to be collected. They need to be collected when we gather them to get focused on something to learn, just as we need to gather them when they first come into our classrooms. If we're working in an online environment, how do you gather them in an online environment before we get started with the tasks? Collecting is about engaging the attachment instincts inside of us, the emotional pull that we feel. Through hopefully this experience through COVID, that trying to gather your children through a digital device has been a lot more challenging. That if you were to do this in person, that you'd have much more to work from. You'd have much more of the emotions and the instincts to connect with each other that would be more provoked. And so this is the key here, that we know that in the limbic system, the emotional system, that being with each other, if the heart is soft, that there is this capacity to move in, to be close, and to create, as Martin Buber said, the sphere of the in-between, where we come together for the purpose of relationship, this connection. And so how do we do this with our kids? Well, here are some ways, but again, this is innate. You'll find many ways to collect your kids. Use their name, greet them at the door. Remember what's important to them. I remember as a prof, I was always trying to remember, okay, what ology is that student taking? Okay, they're in sociology, they're in biology. What I was trying to remember everybody's majors. It was really hard. Sometimes I just have to write it down on my little seating plan, what everybody's ology was. Math was easy. They stuck out because there was always usually far and few between there. But remembering what's important to them, things that they did on the weekend, things they're looking forward to, that conveys significance. You matter more to me than just the job that I do. I see you as a person. I remember things about you. Do you remember that as a kid? The teacher just remembering something about you, and that sense of, oh, I matter. They think about me. They think about me outside of my math mark. They think about me outside of how I played volleyball. They think about me. That's the invitation for relationship that says you matter. Caring for them in unexpected ways. Sometimes with my students, I'd give them, articles that I had read that I knew that were in their interest areas, or, video clips or stuff that I'd seen that I thought matched their interests. When I was working with younger kids, again, it's just coming alongside and seeing that they were having troubles, offering some help, doing it in a way that was kind and caring. Feeding them if you can. That's going to be tricky now with COVID, of course, but feeding is a very powerful way to bring people into attachment. Looking at with fondness or a twinkle in your eye, not a creepy twinkle, of course, but kind of hello, I'm happy to see you. If that's not you, don't fake this. Don't force this. This should feel innate. This isn't an act. This is who you are. However it is that you show up. I've got a friend who's just this soft, gentle. Um, she's just I can't describe her other than, she's just soft, gentle presence. She's not loud and out there, but she has this calming, connecting way of greeting her students. It's not an act, it's who she is. Help me understand. Help me understand what's going on for you. I see you struggling there. I see you breaking your pencil. I see you, wiggling in your chair. Help me understand what's going on for you. That's relationship. I care about you. I'm noticing you. You're not a problem. I can see you're having problems here. Or hold on a second, I can't get to you right now, but I'm going to get to you in a bit. Or I can see this is a struggle for you. That's okay. It's a struggle. It's a struggle for lots of folks. It's all right. Yeah, we'll get through this. We'll find a way through. I'm still here for you. Listening with full attention, circulating to collect their and engage them, learning about their interests. There's so many different ways. These are not techniques. These are just ways to engage in relationship, ways that say you matter to me, but you can find many on your own, I'm sure. What's really important, of course, in today's classroom is that if limited by time, focus on the few that you need to focus on. And this was oftentimes very true in my classrooms, especially in a university context where I have 3 hours, 14 weeks. That's it, 3 hours a week for 14 weeks. How is it that I create a culture of connection in my classroom when I have limited time with my students? Well, who do you work attachments with? Your class leader. You got to have your class leader on. The challenging student who before they come a challenge, or the one who's the least attachable, the one who's hiding from you, the one that might be the most anxious. Because again, if you can bring that child on board and cultivate a relationship with them, other children or other kids in your classroom, the anxiety will go down. The more that you can have a relationship with a bully or form some liaison with that dominant child in your classroom, everyone else is going to feel a lot better and a lot safer, knowing that you are in charge. In our peer-oriented classrooms today, it may be looking like what your classroom may feel like or look like. We have many different children in our classes today, and some of them are coming in looking to the teacher to be the answer here. All these blue kids are saying, okay, what's the lesson for today? Help me understand. What are the rules? Yes, I'm following along. Their alarm system is keeping them paying attention, and they're motivated. However, you may find that you have a child, the green leader in the classroom, and they have a posse. They've got a posse of people, of kids that are looking to them. Should we follow along? Should we answer? Should we do this? Can we be in a group together? Oh, if I'm not in a group with them, oh, this is stupid. You can just imagine how this shows up in your classroom. I dare say you've experienced this a lot. So who is it when we're short on time and attention and competing things? Where do we work efficiently, expediently on attachment? We go for the green one. And as soon as we get the green child, we bring everyone to us. That would be a fast way of working at it. I remember one of the Gordon Neufeld did a TED Talk at West Vancouver in education. It's a beautiful TED Talk. If you have time, go see it. It's on why relationship matters. However, there was a teacher there from the Langley School District, and she talked about, I think she was a kindergarten teacher, and she talked about lunch with her littles, and she made it a priority that every week she'd have lunch with one of her kindergarten kids, and they showed up in their best clothes that day. Their mother or father had helped them prepare some food to share. And it was incredible in terms of building relationship, conveying significance and that they mattered. That 15, 20-minute lunch that they had with their teacher, I dare say that those kindergarten kids would carry on. I know some kindergarten teachers who still go and do home visits. Incredible. In interventions and working with kids who are really stuck, grade 8, grade 9, whatever the grade. A phone call home, a visit. I'm here to work with you. I want you to be successful in French. How do we get on board together? Not punitive, but I'm here to be the answer. How do we do that? How do we work through these problems in the context of attachment? So these are some questions for you. What are some ways that you collect your students? You collect staff in the morning, right? When you've had some separation in the morning, it's important to get to hello before a learning task, right? Don't automatically assume that their attention hasn't waned. You need to bring them back to the learning. After lunch break, at other times, if you're working in a post-secondary, again, they're moving through different classes, and they may have you on alternate days. There's all different types of ways of thinking about this. Whatever your structure routine is, how do you collect your kids and get down to the business of attachment and put relationship before learning? Because that's the order that it comes in developmentally. What are some of the ways that you collect your parents and their family members? That could be classroom wide, even just giving an assignment that talks about families. Sometimes that can be tricky depending upon the population of students and some of the losses that your kids face. However, these are true and there for them. And so there's a way through some of this. And school wide, how do you collect, the assemblies that, we realize now as we face COVID and all the ways that we gather, that how important these are for the purpose of relationship. So how do we do this in the age of COVID? Bridging is a second ritual that's important here. After we engage the attachment instincts, what does it mean to bridge? Well, relationships are hard. Relationships are hard. And I actually don't think we're meant to look at them so directly. I think we're much better coming to each other's side on tasks when there's emotional issues. But a pure focus on relationship is oftentimes alarming at best. So what happens in relationships, why relationships are alarming, is because we rub against each other the wrong way. We let each other down. We have expectations that are not met. We become immature, say the wrong thing, get overwhelmed. Our emotions get the better of us. And so there are always divides in our relationship. This is true for marriages. It's true for student and child, as it's true for friends. This is the challenge of relationships. And so what is really important is that we are able to bridge the distance that comes up in our relationship. And so when we sense separation with our kids, how do we deal with the problem behavior and not lose the relationship? How do we, when we have to give discipline, maybe there are consequences that have to come as a result of some actions. You can't just let particular behavior hijack your classroom and not have some sort of sense of safety or way of dealing with it. You can't leave kids to enact justice on their own. How do we get through that? How do we preserve our relationship? What if a child has faults or shortcomings? They can't, have impulse control in their classroom. They can't seem to get it right. You've told them 1,000 times. How do we bridge that and hold on to our relationship? How do we bridge defensive detachment, the most desperate of all defenses, where a child just blocks you out? You can't even get eye contact. They may run, they may hide from you. How do you bridge that and not do harm to the relationship, one that isn't even existing, and to make it safe? And the key thing here is you've got to bridge. You've got to find ways to hold on. You've got to find ways to say the relationship's okay, even if this is happening. There's some helpful ways, I think, to think about this, is that in our discipline process, we can think of it as a two-part series. One, when in the incident, we have to take the lead. I can't let this occur. We're going to have to do something different. This is what's going to happen. When the disruption occurs, we have to take the lead, yes. But we don't have to deal with everything in that moment. Sometimes it's just about do no harm, preserve the integrity and integrity of everybody, and get out of this situation so that we can all take a breath and we can all figure out, how am I going to make headway with this child? What indeed is happening here? That every day at recess, this child feels compelled to climb on the portable after being told 100 times not to climb on the portable. What do I see here? How do I help this child? What is going on here? So get yourself out of the incident, especially when children are really stuck and emotions are high. Take a step back and then think about, what do I need to do to work with this child? Work outside of the incident, work inside your relationship with a child. Try to think about, this child, he just, every time you say do this, he does the opposite. This child has so much counter will, resistance and opposition. Is this child not connected? Are they not connected to that teacher? Oh, it's at lunchtime. They love their teacher. It's at lunchtime when they're not connected to anybody on the lunch. What if we put an adult out there that they were connected to, that could help them at lunchtime, and to made some room for the fact that the more that he feels told not to climb on the fence, the tree, the portable, the more that he's told that, the more it makes him want to. What if we could say that out loud? What if an adult could come to his side? I bet that we could make potentially some headway with this child. So how do we do discipline? Yes, we have to deal with it in the moment, but how do we bridge? How do we bridge to our intervention, which is going to actually make the most difference here? And, sometimes punishment does need to be given because, for preserving the integrity of a school environment, there has to be seen to have structure rules. Parents otherwise will command and demand, retribution or whatever it is. There has to be someone who is in charge, who's able to say, these are the codes of conduct for our environment, and proceed, but continue to work on the relationship with the child. Even when I had students come in who I had to give, 0 on plagiarized papers, or didn't hand in their assignments or whatever it was. The invitation was always there. Listen, you might have been struggling with this. I get it. Sometimes these papers, they're not easy. Sometimes you get overwhelmed. Sometimes you take shortcuts. I'm here to help you. That's what a teacher is. This doesn't have to happen again. I'm still here. This doesn't make me go away just because you made a mistake. And solicit good intentions with your students. Yes, this didn't work out. Can I count on you, to put your hand up instead of talking out each time? Put your hand up. I'm going to look at you and let you know that I'm going to get to you, but can I count on you to wait? Okay. I want to hear what you have to say, but I just can't have you just, you got to wait your turn. Can I count on you with this? Aiming the child in the right direction, working outside of these incidences when the emotion is low, working with them to say, hey, point in this direction. Can I count on you? The power of an adult you're attached to, say, can I count on you? I believe in you. Wow. For motivation, it's incredible. There are no stickers in there. There's no amount of stickers you could give that could compare with the kind of motivation that a child feels when they believe an adult believes in them and they want to make it work in the direction that adult is going. And that's the power of relationship. We've lost sight of that. We think that stickers and a happy face on a sticker is somehow more important than our face. We've somehow forgotten that the best tool for, helping the heart settle and the emotions that get so stirred up and the alarm that comes with learning something new, or the challenges, that seeing our face, that seeing our relationship is intact, is actually the antidote. The relationship has always been the antidote to adversity, right? And so we can't lose sight of what nature gave us to take care of each other. It's relationship. And finally, matchmaking. This is the last attachment ritual that's critical to building a culture of connection. And that is basically where we use relationships that we have with our children to create new relationships. How do you create a village? One person at a time. If you're the grade 2 teacher and your kids are going to grade 3, or they're going to go see the librarian, or whatever it is they're going to do, how do you build the relationship to that librarian? How do you bring in the principal? How do you bring in the educational assistant? How do you introduce whoever it is that's going to play a role with your kids? How do you pass the baton of relationship over? Can I count on you? I remember when I worked in post-secondary, one of my colleagues who had worked within the counseling office, she became a prof in psychology, and she brought me in to do a guest session. I was essentially, flown in for one class to do an exercise with the kids, and I had no relationship. They loved her, and so I was just, this insertion in their class, and you could just almost feel the energy in the class. Ugh, we got a guest speaker, when they really just wanted to hear her talk. It probably helped that her expertise was on sexuality, and she had the most interesting of stories. But she did the loveliest of jobs in introducing me to her class. She talked about me and said, this is my colleague Deborah. We used to work in counseling together, and I tell you, this is what I love about Deborah, and this is why I asked Deborah to come in and talk to you. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, I sure feel this wonderful invitation to be in her class. Not show up and do your lesson plan, but wow, she wants me here. She is introducing me to her students and making her students fall into relationship with me. And because they loved her, they then welcomed me into the classroom for the purpose of being their teacher for that short amount of time. And so this is what we do, is we realize that to build a village, It's not just each individual working on their own, that we work as a community, that we say, is that child connected? How is that child being greeted when they come into the door? So many students, when they enter into I had one school, and every time the child came, someone came in late to school, the person at the front counter, why are you late? And there was this sense of like, oh, you're late and this isn't okay. And the principal had the person at the front counter just welcome them, collect them. Hey, I'm glad you made it. It's good to see you. How are you? Oh, yeah, we run a little late. I get it. That's okay. You're here. Just sign in. Have a good day. And she said the kids went from coming in with their hoodies on and avoiding eye contact because they knew they were in trouble. They knew they weren't going to get a friendly face. They went from coming in with their hoodies on and hiding to bright eyes and a smile, right? Does that make a child better able to learn? Absolutely. What we don't understand is that attachment instincts are polarized, so that when we feel the invitation to be with, when we build a relationship, children seek those people out. And strangers should be, and people that are new, even though they might want to have a relationship with that child and, a new teacher, a substitute, or whoever it is, they're on the outside of the village until the adults who have the child's heart, who have a relationship with the child, say, hey, I've invited this person into your village because let me tell you, this is what they offer you. It'll be up to you to build the relationship, but this is why I've chosen this for you. And this is how we connect our kids so that our children don't just have one. Some kids have so many emotional needs and have so little in their life. Teachers feel the weight of that. And that can't be born alone. We need to share that. Some of our kids are very hungry, not just for food, but for connection. We must bear that together. And so we need to matchmake. So we arrange introductions. We arrange introductions between adults or even peer mentoring, older kids that might, help them on the playground or help them in the classroom. If they're going to be a peer mentor to other younger kids, that would be beautiful as well in terms of their relationships. Endearing their children to their parents, to their teachers, to students to their teachers, mentoring relationships between kids. These are all wonderful ways to do attachment. I was asked on a podcast once, how do we increase the attachment with our kids? And I said, it's not to lose sight that our children, when placed in hierarchical relationship with each other, where they depend on other older kids or they are the answer to younger kids, is also about relationship. That's also about a village. The village isn't always just made up of adults. It's made up of friends. It's made up of peers. Healthy peer relationships are part of your village. But there's no better place to draw out a child's natural caring than when you put them in a hierarchical relationship where they're either being cared for by an older child or they are the answer to a younger child. So, in essence, what are the rituals that cultivate a relational school culture? Is to realize that our children need to be invited into relationship with us through collecting our eyes, our smile, the tone of our voice, our initiative to say, do I have each kid in this class? Can I go and collect every child in this class? Who is the hardest to collect? Who shies away from me? Who doesn't want to be near me? Who is hiding from me? Right? That's the way that we build a culture of connection in our classroom and in our school. And when things come up that divide us, things that put us on opposite ends of what is appropriate, what is okay, when there are shortcomings that have come between us that we must attend to, not to forget the relationship is important to hold on to. Yes, we must do our job. We must lead. We must find a way through the impasses. But how do we do this preserving everyone's dignity and having integrity, that this must also be the way that we come together? And finally, matchmaking, where we build the village by introducing children to the attachments that are there to take care of them. This is absolutely critical, and this is our job. If we really rooted ourselves in relationship, this isn't something we do off the side of our desk. When I look through my curriculum, I think about how my curriculum topics will help collect, engage them, and build a relationship. I think about the challenges that may come up as I venture forth into different topics. I think about how I can be a bridge to the people in their life that they hold on to. I think about how I can matchmake them to the world and to the adults that take care of them. Just through the lens of curriculum, I would ask those questions. In how I set up my classroom environment, I would ask those questions. It's not something I do on the side of my desk. a class that I took. It's embedded in our architecture as human beings, in our DNA, in our emotions, in our instincts to be together. All I'm doing is giving some language for it and some cultural practices. But of course, you could know all of this and not be able to show up like this in your classroom. So don't let any of this interfere at the same time with you building the relationships that come natural to you in your classroom. At the end of the day, what we see determines what we do. If our eyes are just on task, then that's going to be where we're going to focus. But if actually what we see is the importance of relationship, that this must ground us, then that actually is going to shape and be the lens through which we see everything. And at the end of the day, what we do actually helps create the school culture that we all live, work, and learn in, and hopefully feel safe in and secure as we enter into the time of COVID here. This was a picture that my nephew did in elementary school. I think it was grade 1. He had just entered in full day, and the teacher's name, Mrs. Codd. I've blanked out some of it here. But see this beautiful representation. He's got his arms outstretched to her, she to him. This is his representation of her. They look very similar, of course, because when you are attached, you are very similar to each other. And he says, I love you. I love you. This took 3 weeks and he fell in love with his grade 1 teacher. And she says, oh, thank you. I think you're very special too, right? Now, what will this teacher have the power to do? Just about anything. Will he follow her, learn from her, think math is wonderful, special? Will he listen to the rules? Will he help another classmate? You bet he will. Why? Not because he's mature, not because he's figured it out, not because he understands everything to do with school, but because his teacher has his heart, because his teacher is the answer. And so she can take him and have a year with him where his potential is exponential in comparison to having a teacher with whom he's not attached. When I asked my sister, what is it that Mrs. Codd did to win his heart? She said, well, I'll ask him. And he told her, well, Mom, she has a baseball glove and she comes at recess and she throws the ball with me. My sister's watched. Maybe for 5 minutes, she throws the ball with him with her baseball glove and he with his. And together they build attachment. And she leads them then back to the classroom where he can learn and he can thrive. I hope this has been helpful. As Gordon Neufeld says, children learn best when they like their teacher and they think their teacher likes them too. It is so simple, but yet it is so profound. And it is a tragedy that we've lost sight of this and that so many competing pressures take us away from this very profound truth that relationships must matter in our educational endeavor, because without them, we will be fighting upstream, trying to swim upstream and fighting a strong headwind to take our children where we want them to go. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope this helps make sense of the kids in your care and the importance of relationships in our classrooms.
Thanks so much, Deborah, for spending your morning with us. There's some great food for thought there and some great little nuggets to take away and really latch on to right at the start. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.